Hello, you're listening to E-Bible Fellowship's new open form excerpts, and now we present the following excerpt.
Welcome to
Hello,
our open
Mr.
forum program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Mr. McCann. I'm calling from Spain, and I was just listening to what you were saying, and it reminded me of the other day I was reading in First Samuel, and I know that that whole period of time when were in the wilderness, it's a picture of what's happening now. And I was thinking that part where they wanted a king, even though Samuel told them, no, God is your king. They wanted a king. And I was thinking, is that like now that people want a church? They want physical leadership? Or what would that be the picture of?
Well, yeah, that was a testing program too, where God was their king. Israel was a theophany, or excuse me, no, what do they call that? Not a theophany. Well, they were ruled by God. God was the ruler of Israel, and the Lord would just raise up judges to perform certain tasks for a certain period of time. But then Israel wanted to be like the nations. And that's often the problem with the people of God, or the corporate body, Israel in the Old Testament, the church in the New Testament, is they kind of cast their eye on the world. They have one eye on the world and one eye on God and his word. And so they wanted to be like the nations. And yet it ultimately turned out to be according to God's will. We know that the Lord used the kings of Israel, the kings of Judah, to portray, to be pictures of Christ, like David, and other kings like Hezekiah, good kings. But initially, the Lord did speak of it as though they had failed the test, that they, were doing something unfaithful. And I think that would just point to the fact that, the outward body, the outward representative that Israel was, failed on that point. And then throughout their whole history, they would fail on point after point after point, when they were tried, when they were tested, and it would bring down the wrath of God. That's why there were judges, because Israel went apostate, lusted after other gods, and the Lord turned them over into the hands of the nations, and then he would raise up a judge to deliver them. Well, same thing with the kings. They would go apostate, and heathen nations would arise and come against them, and God would deliver them. It was just repeated throughout the whole history of Israel, and it was teaching of the churches and congregations. When churches would lust or seek after other gospels, and they would be judged by God, they would go apostate. It's just the character of the corporate body, because in the corporate body, there was always wheat and tares, or saved and unsaved. But what God has done since ending the church age is he deals with people as individuals. He's just dealing one-on-one with his elect people. And there are no other people of God but the elect, those who would say they're the people of God and we're Christians in the churches. Well, God has disowned them. He has removed himself from them, just like he did from Israel before the church. God is just dealing one-on-one. So I don't think there's a tie-in particularly with this time period, except in Proverbs. The Lord does tell us in Proverbs chapter 6, if we go there, he does emphasize that there are not to be rulers, where we read of the ant in Proverbs 6, verse 6. It says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise." So the Lord is setting up the ant as a very wise creature, And the elect are wise because when we're saved, we receive the Spirit of Christ, and He's the essence of wisdom. So possessing His Spirit causes us to possess wisdom. And now the ant is likened to those who are wise. Actually, if we go to Proverbs 30, there's another reference to ants in Proverbs 30, and it says in verse 24, there be four things which are little upon the earth, but they are exceeding wise. The ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their meat in the summer. There we read that God calls the ants wise and a people. And so it's not surprising that in Proverbs 6, he's setting them up as the people of God, wise in salvation, who come out of the churches. In Proverbs 6:6, go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. So the ant has no guide, overseer, or ruler. There's no other ant telling the ant, okay, let's march and go to this place and we'll grab some food and carry it back. The ant just instinctively does it. The ant, God has given the ant the characteristic, the instinctive nature to work and to work very hard and to do the things it does. Well, that's what God has done with his elect in this time period. The church age is over. We used to have overseers and rulers in the church, the pastor, the elders, the deacons. They had oversight over the congregation. They would discipline the congregation. They set the course. The preaching of the spiritual leaders set the course for the church, the churches and congregations. And now we're not under them. We're not under their authority. They have no oversight over us because God has caused them to cease from feeding the flock, as we read in, I think it's Ezekiel 34, I think. God has caused the pastors to cease from feeding the flock, cease from having any authority over the flock in any way. Yet, why is it that the people of God are still going forth with the gospel? Why are we still teaching? Why are we still praying? Why are we still carrying tracts? Well, someone might say, well, yeah, there is an organization with e-Bible, but a lot of people who listen to e-Bible, we're not telling them to do things. There's people, and they get tracts and they get a shirt, and they go out on their own. They go out and hand out tracts, or when they're going to the store, they're handing a tract to the person at the checkout. Who's telling them to do that? It's God. It's God moving within his people. God is the one, this applies to earthly oversight, earthly guidance. We know the Holy Spirit is our guide in truth. The Holy Spirit, or God himself, is overseeing us and directing the course of our lives. But there's a lot of people that the Lord is in control of. God's the only authority today. The Bible's the only authority. No man is the authority. That is the characteristic, the nature of this time period. But I don't know if I see that in 1 Samuel with that account. That would, I think, tie in more with the church age because it's happening within Israel, and Israel is a type of the church.
Thanks for watching, and be on the lookout for more new open forum excerpts that will be added periodically.